Friends, before I share some thoughts, I do want to let you know that I'm going to be speaking about a sensitive issue, violence against women. I almost threw up twice this past week. Don't worry, I'm not sick. But I was sickened, and I almost threw up. The first time was when I read a report about sexual and gender-based violence perpetrated by Hamas on October 7th. I had heard, and I'm sure you've all heard, that women had been raped, but I hadn't really understood the depths of the depths of the depravity. There were instances of gang rape, of mutilation, of sexual torture. This was perpetrated against little girls and women. Female victims were assaulted and then shot in the head. Pregnant women had their bellies sliced open so the terrorists could then decapitate the unborn children. Hamas GoPro footage shows naked women being dragged through the streets of Gaza City as war trophies. A Hamas member of an elite force that was captured testifies that terrorists were given permission to rape the dead body of a girl. So you can understand how I almost threw up for the first time. The second time was when I was watching footage from a city council meeting in Oakland, California from this past week. The city council was debating a resolution whether they should condemn Hamas. That the resolution didn't pass is bad enough. That the floor's mic turned into a cesspool of anti-Semitic spew was even worse. Speaker after speaker arose. There have not been beheadings of babies and rapings. Israel murdered their own people, said one speaker. The notion that this was a massacre of Jews is a fabricated narrative, said another speaker, and on it went. We're all familiar with Holocaust denial. This is the latest incarnation. Tragically, this denial is not limited to what we might think of as just a few crackpots in Oakland. We've seen it in the upper echelons of women's rights organizations. The very organizations meant to lift up women's voices silenced them when that voice was Israeli. UN Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls claimed that the evidence against Hamas was not solid enough to warrant a statement, even though the terrorists documented and posted the horrific act themselves. In the United Kingdom, a women's rights group claimed that the reports of sexual assault against Israelis were, listen to this, that they were Islamophobic and a racist weaponization of sexual violence. America's National Women's Studies Association released a statement, but made no mention of the vicious sexual crimes committed against Israelis. Instead, it reaffirmed its commitment to BDS and called Hamas a resistance movement. In response, Israeli women groups launched the Me Too Unless You're a Jew campaign, in which they slammed victim blaming, the denials and whitewashings of Hamas crimes, and outright support for Hamas atrocities. The fact that people didn't believe the stories of women being assaulted is not so surprising. The silence of women's groups, however, is twisted and despicable. As Sheryl Sandberg wrote this week, no matter what political or religious beliefs people have, all can agree that rape should never be used as an act of war. Yet while global women's organizations and human rights activists yelled in horror when widespread sexual assault was committed in other wars such as Rwanda, the silence on Hamas war crimes is, she said, deafening. Sadly, as you know, this is hardly the first time that women have been assaulted and their voices silenced. Now, usually I skip over the story of Dinah from this week's Parsha as a sermon topic. Not only is her rape brutal, the violent, vengeful response of her brothers is reprehensible. But this morning, without a bar bat mitzvah, and in light of recent events, it demands our attention. The story of Dinah is as tragic as it is short. One verse mentions her birth, 2 verses speak of her rape, and 1 verse that we'll read a few weeks from now just include her in a genealogy. That's it. Unlike the other matriarchs, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, that we read about in Breshit and Genesis, we know nothing of Dinah, nothing of her as a child or an older woman. We don't know her thoughts or her dreams, her challenges or her triumphs. We never even hear her speak. Dinah is spoken about, but never spoken to. She's acted upon, but never seems to have any agency. I want to invite you to open up your Chumashim to page 206 as we read through the story slowly with the commentary in our Eitz Chaim Chumashim, page 206. So we'll read basically verse by verse, and then I'll be looking at the commentary below on the page, beginning of chapter 34. Now Dinah, the daughter whom Leah had borne to Jacob, went out to visit the daughters of the land. Notice that word, went out, yotzeit. See the commentary where it says went out. Girls of marriageable age normally would not go out. They wouldn't leave a rural encampment to venture alone into an alien city. The narrative subtly criticizes Dinah's highly unconventional behavior. And this has been interpreted, as you see, by some as promiscuous conduct. Verse 2. Shechem, son of Hamor the Hivite, chief of the country, saw her and took her and lay with her and disgraced her. Now, if you see in the Hebrew, there's 3 verbs that come in succession. Vayikach, vayishkav, vayaneha. And again, the commentary points out, took, lay, and that word force is disgraced her. The 3 verbs of increasing severity attest to the brutality of Shechem's assault on Dinah. Verse 3. Being strongly drawn to Dinah, daughter of Jacob, and in love with the maiden, he spoke to the maiden tenderly. So Shechem said to his father Hamor, "Get me this girl as a wife." Jacob heard that he had defiled his daughter Dinah, but since his sons were in the field with his cattle, Jacob kept silent until they came home. Now that's striking that Jacob kept silent, seemingly passive until reinforcements come. Verse 6, then Shechem's father Hamor came out to Jacob to speak to him. Meanwhile, Jacob's sons, having heard the news, came in from the field. The men were distressed and very angry because he had committed an outrage in Israel by lying with Jacob's daughter, a thing not to be done. If you turn back to that previous page where it says an outrage, the Hebrew word translated as outrage is nevela. And as the commentary says, it is a powerful noun describing offenses of such profound abhorrence that they threaten to tear apart the fabric of Israelite society. For society's own self-protection, such atrocities can never be tolerated or left unpunished. This was a thing not to be done among the people of Israel and not in any civilized society. Close your Chumashim. While there may be some comfort in noticing that Dinah's brothers cry out and they come to her defense, at the same time we get the sense that it is because they see their sister's rape as an assault on the honor of the family, not first and foremost an abuse of a woman, their sister. And this only serves to highlight Dinah's silence. A book recently translated into English called Dirshuni, Contemporary Women's Midrash, seeks to fill the void and give voice to the Torah's women. These creative modern midrashim were written by women. And interestingly, because they are written in the traditional rabbinic idiom, the book has become popular in Orthodox women's circles and is taking its place on bookshelves in traditional women's yeshivot. Here's some of the commentary on this passage. Why was Dinah such a quiet person who had no voice? The author asks. Because the members of her own household, meaning her 6 brothers, did not listen to her. They didn't engage her in conversation. Rather, they followed the dictum of the sages from Pirkei Avot, do not engage in excessive conversations with women. And that is why she went out. That's why she went out to visit the daughters of the land, to go out to seek friendship. Perhaps among them, she would find someone to speak to and would be spoken to. But how is it, the author continues, when she was raped, that she did not cry out? Midrash answers, it is as if out of the pain and the shame, she hushed up and fell silent. And her silence resounds from one end of the world to the other. It is the scream of the heart. With sensitivity and in keeping with modern psychology, the author understands that many women are rendered speechless when they become victims of such crime. Dinah's silence begins at home and continues in her life outside her home, and it speaks to her lack of recourse and to the enormity of the injustice committed against her. The Midrash does not give us a happy ending. Rather, it forces us to confront the silence and to name those complicit in silencing her long before the actual attack. Looking back on these last 6 weeks, we've come to recognize another group of women who were silenced long before the actual attack. They were silenced with deadly consequences. The Tatzpaniot, the spotters, who were located close to the Gaza border. For months, these largely young women soldiers repeatedly reported deeply concerning observations that Hamas was training for an incursion against Israel. Their superiors ignored them and overlooked their reports. One of the spotters decided to go directly to a senior commander in the area and was told, quote, I don't want to hear again about this nonsense. If you all bother us again with these things, you will be court-martialed. They silenced them, and many paid the highest price as they were slaughtered by Hamas. At some point in the future, there will be an investigation. Listening to their brave and insistent voices, writes Rabbi Ayelet Cohen, the dean of JTS's rabbinical program. Listening to their brave and insistent voices, she said, will necessitate an important reckoning on the climate for women in the Israeli army and the state of preparedness for that terrible day. There will come a time when the nation will be forced to listen to their voices, but for too many, it is too little, too late. Dinah and the spotters were silenced. But over the last few weeks, we've learned about a different group of women who made their voices heard through their deeds. At 6:30 a.m., my commander wakes me up and tells me there's a terrorist infiltration, said Hagar. We didn't really understand the enormity of the event. What Hagar meant was that she didn't understand the enormity of the attack. Neither did she appreciate the enormity of this as an historical moment. You see, Hagar is a member of an all-women tank commander unit. And this was the first time in human history that a female armored crew participated in active battle. After getting the call, the soldiers jumped into action. They drove at top speed from the Egyptian border where they were stationed. They drove north. When they spotted terrorists, they shot them, and in some cases, they just ran them over. They smashed through the gates of a kibbutz and hunted down the infiltrators, having to define enemy and friend. For 17 straight hours, they battled, killing dozens and dozens of terrorists, and because of their actions, their commander said, they prevented the attack from moving further south. But these soldiers, these women, were not interested in accolades for their historic battle. So what? So what does it matter, one asked? Did the terrorists know that there were girls in the tank? You think they saw Michal's hair sticking out of the helmet? No. Boys, girls, what does it matter? You keep saying heroines and historic, another chimed in. I don't feel like a hero. I feel like I'm a soldier, that I was given a job, and I did my job. I think anyone would have done that. Maybe so. Maybe, however, it really does matter. Maybe it matters to Israelis. Maybe it forces all of us to wake up, especially us men, forces us to wake up and to listen. And maybe if the nation listens to women who help fend off attackers and fight a war, perhaps one day we will also listen to them in their fight for peace. Dinah's silence, the Midrash says, was the scream of the heart. I'd like to conclude with Avodah Shebalev, with a prayer of the heart, the prayer of the Mothers for Life and Peace, composed by two women clergy, Rabbi Tamar Elad Applebaum and Shicha Ibtisam Mahamid. May all of us hear and heed this prayer. God of life who heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds, may it be your will to hear the prayer of mothers. For you did not create us to kill each other, nor to live in fear, anger, or hatred in your world, but rather you have created us so that we can grant permission to one another to sanctify your name of life, your name of peace in this world. For these things I weep, my eye runs down with water, for your children crying at night, for parents holding their children with despair and darkness in their hearts, for a gate that is closing, and who will open it before the day has ended? And with my tears and prayers which I pray, and with the tears of all women who deeply feel the pain of these difficult days, I raise my hands to you. Please, God, have mercy on us. Hear our voice, that we shall not despair, that we shall see life in each other, that we shall have mercy for one another, that we shall have pity on each other, that we shall hope for each other. And we shall write our lives in the book of life. For you, for your sake, God of life, let us choose life. For you are peace. Your world is peace, and all that is yours is peace. And so shall be your will. And Omar, amen.